Qin Feiyue composed himself and told Venerable He, Imperial Preceptor has no interest in the great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures. With his droopy eyes, Venerable He chuckled. If Imperial Preceptor has no interest, I wonder if General Qin is interested? Qin Feiyue's heart trembled. He knew no matter what he says, he would be unable to dispel the wariness that this vicious fiend had towards him. An elder below Qin Feiyue raised his white brows and said, I'm old and do not have many days left to live. Therefore, I would like to have a look at the great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures that is rumored to be able to turn into a god and into a devil. Can I get permission from Cult Mistress and Venerable He? That's not a problem. Cult Mistress looked around with her beautiful eyes and smiled. Who else wants to have a look at the great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures? A yellow-faced woman sitting below Fu Yundi smiled. If Mistress doesn't mind, I would like to take a look at this godly but devil Bible. Cult Mistress looked at Fu Yundi. How about City Lord? Fu Yundi laughed heartily. Don't be offended, Mistress. I'm not harboring any thoughts on the great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures and only wants to take a look at the so-called mysterious technique that could turn one into a god and into a devil. I want to mutually corroborate our techniques. I have no ill intentions to Mistress and even have tender, protective feelings for you. The vicious Heavenly Devil cult had searched so long for Mistress. Mistress must feel helpless alone. I would also like to share some of Mistress's troubles. Qin Mu blinked his eyes and swept his gaze over all the strong practitioners. Everyone in River Suppression Floor had expressed interest in great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures, and that was why everyone didn't dare to lay their hands on Cult Mistress so as to prevent harm to themselves. Because even if they were to steal the great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures from Cult Mistress, they would be the one targeted by everyone next. Cult Mistress looked at everyone's expression and suddenly burst out in a laughter. Her slender white hands opened up and a jade box appeared on her hands. Inside this is the great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures. The talismans outside are the seals of the past generation's Devil Cult Master. The atmosphere in River Suppression Floor became extremely solemn. Qin Mu immediately felt a tyrannical and dreadful aura locking onto him. Ling Yuxiu also gave a silent groan. The aura was not aimed at them, but was aimed at Cult Mistress, who was beside them. However, because the two of them were very close to her, Qin Mu and Ling Yuxiu were dragged into the fray. Cult Mistress paid no mind to it and opened the jade box. There seemed to be a tune coming from the box as a thread peeked its head out of the jade box like a spirit snake before slowly rising up. It really is the great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures. Venerable He knocked his crutch and said resolutely, Please keep it, Mistress. Qin Mu had a weird expression as he stretched his neck to look at the jade box. An unspeakable strangeness welled up inside him. That's not the great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures. That was clearly the ball of thread that Granny C often carried around with her. He remembered this ball of thread. Granny C often put the ball of thread in the basket, and the thread was coiled around a jade hairpin which was currently inside the box. When he was young, Granny C would often put him in the basket when she was tailoring clothes. There was once Qin Mu couldn't hold back and defecated inside the basket, covering the entire great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures in a stench. She's really Granny C. The youth didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I was wondering why Granny didn't remain at the inn, so it turns out that she had dolled herself up and came out to have fun. Cult Mistress paid no attention to Venerable He and the thread rose higher and higher. Suddenly the thread swelled up and became thicker and thicker. When the thread was as thick as a water barrel, everyone's expression changed. They saw that the thread wasn't actually a thread, but was marvelous writing formed by countless of letters. Numerous letters formed a circular shape which overlapped one layer after another. Countless of layers together, when shrunk to the extreme, made it look like a thread and not letters. This was the Heavenly Devil Cult's Legacy Devil Bible, Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures. Now can everyone be sure that the item is real? The countless letters suddenly shrunk and turned back into a thread and returned to the jade box. Cult Mistress closed the jade box and used the talismans of past devil cult masters to seal it back. She then lightly laughed. However, if you want to take a look, you will have to first consider carefully. Whoever that sees the Heavenly Devil Cult's legacy Devil Bible will become the enemies of Heavenly Devil Cult. I won't be the one who gets hunted down by Heavenly Devil Cult, and all of you would have to die today. So which one of you is coming over to take the jade box away? Everyone's expression changed hugely. They all had hesitation in their heart. The jade box was right in front of them, but none of them dared to take it away. Qin Feiyue's expression wavered. Other people might be afraid of Heavenly Devil Cult, but he wasn't. No matter how strong Heavenly Devil Cult was, they wouldn't be able to stand up to Eternal Peace Empire. However, if he took away the jade box, he would become everyone's target, and it was hard for him to even live to walk out of the city lord's manor. Other people had the same thoughts. Even if Fu Yundi was hesitant to make a move, they were unable to make a decision. Cult Mistress took delight in observing everyone's expression. She was happy to see a situation where all the strong practitioners who were insufferably arrogant were having a headache over it. This was a kind of joy for her. The building was filled with silence. At this moment, Qinmu stretched his back and stood up. I'm full. Sister Yushio, thank you for bringing me here to have a good feast. City Lord, do I need to pay for eating a meal here? He broke the silence and regained the lively atmosphere in the building. Everyone seemed to be smiling as they all looked at him. This youth was clearly from the village and had never seen the world before. He came here to eat for free and actually still asked Fu Yundi if he had to pay. Fu Yundi coughed to dispel the awkwardness. Since you're here, you're also a guest. Since I have invited everyone here to dinner, I won't take a single cent from little brother, even though you are not on the guest list. Qinmu gave a smile which was radiant like the sun. Even if City Lord doesn't want to take from me, I can't not pay. I don't have much money on me. Is 100 dragon coins enough? Please wait a moment, City Lord. Let me kill someone and win the money to pay you. Fu Yundi frowned. Qinmu didn't wait for his reply and walked down river suppression floor. In a step, he crossed onto the lake and walked towards the platform, calling out, Young Master Tingwei, I heard that abandoned people can earn 100 dragon coins by fighting in this arena. I'm an abandoned people, so let me have a try. His footsteps were in no hurry and did not slow down as he came to the platform and looked at the youth in front of him. On the platform, the abandoned youth in front of Fu Tingwei was totally stained with blood. A slave threw the youth's body into the lake and used water to clean the platform. There was a huge fish in the lake churning up waves to grab a bite of the youth's mangled corpse. Qinmu stood on the hard ground and looked at the youth in front of him. Fu Tingwei was the same age as him, but his brows had a ruthless look. It was obvious he had killed countless people. The youth was sizing him up with the vicious gaze of a wild beast. The atmosphere in river suppression floor suddenly fell silent again. They were all seasoned strong practitioners that had great divine arts and wide knowledge, but never would they expect Qinmu to fight with the #1 person in Spirit Embryo Realm to earn these 100 dragon coins to pay Fu Yundi. What big guts! Elder Baishan sighed. It's hard for youth with such guts to survive until adulthood. They normally die at this age. Fu Yundi smiled. Since it isn't confirmed who will be the one to take away great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, why don't we first spectate such an unexpected situation? When this interesting incident comes to an end, we'll then decide the new owner of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures. What do you think, Cult Mistress? Cult Mistress smiled. As a frail woman, what opinion could I have? Ling Yushio gritted her teeth silently. She was about to rise and call Qinmu back when Qin Feiyue coughed as a warning. Therefore, she could only sit down. Platform on the lake. A middle-aged man walked over while holding a tray. On the tray was a coin pouch. Fu Tingwei raised his eyebrows and said, In the pouch is 100 dragon coins. If you win me, you can take it away. However, for the past 3 years, there were 1,000 people who came forward and none was able to take away this pouch of dragon's coins. Qinmu pondered over it and asked, You are the #1 practitioner of Border Dragon City? Fu Tingwei smiled arrogantly and nodded, publicly known to be #1. In a radius of 300 miles, I'm the #1 among all the martial arts practitioners. I've lost count of the numbers of martial arts practitioners I've killed. They were all killed in battle and not relying on my father's fame. As long as they died under my hands, none were able to make it out alive. Qinmu nodded his head gently. Your weapon of choice? With his arms behind him, he smiled. "You can choose any weapon." "I'll choose my weapon at will. Anytime I want to use my weapons, I can feel free to use it." Zichen Nanji. A clear hum rang out as Pig, slaughtering knife flew into Qin Mu's hand. His method wasn't molding qi into thread, but was through mutual sense. His vital qi and the knife had mutual sense, which senses each other mutually, just like two pieces of magnet attracting each other. His vital qi circulated more and more frantically, becoming much more violent. The scene where he had slain the huge snake once again appeared on his body. The angrier he gets, the more violent his vital qi becomes. The mutual sense would become stronger and the knife would become much sharper. However, Qin Mu's face was extremely calm. With a calm appearance, the rage was blazing violent in his heart. Butcher's insanity seemed to have been imparted to him through the pig slaughtering knife skill. Butcher's knife was originally an insane knife, a knife driven by one's emotions. "You use a knife?" Fu Tingwei burst into laughter when he saw the knife that was the size of a chopping board. "What knife is this?" Qin Mu's body moved and knife's light suddenly burst forth like explosions. It was like the turbulent sea with waves overlapping as they crashed down onto Fu Tingwei. Fu Tingyue's arms remained behind him and he sneered. The tinkling sound of weapons colliding rang out as a silver light repeatedly clashed with Pig slaughtering knife. The silver light was a very tiny sword. The sword was only 3 inches long. It was this tiny sword that was flying around like lightning. There was a vital qi thread connected to this sword as young Master Tingwei controlled the sword to fly all around him, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Following that, another 7 tiny swords flew out and blocked Qin Mu's rapid attacks, disallowing his knife to break through. His swords were spirit weapons that could change their shapes freely. Now that his sword was 3 inches, it was harder to block and much easier to control. In addition, it was also much more nimble. By pouring vital qi into a 3-inch sword, it could strengthen the sword and increase its power. He had 8 3-inch sword was controlled using 8-fold heavenly god technique. As the swords appeared and disappeared unpredictably, it was impossible to defend against them. He was not called the #1 practitioner of Border Dragon City for nothing. He had experienced countless of battles and killed countless of people. With a fiendish aura like him, even gods and devils have a hard time to get close to him. However, Qin Mu's knife became heavier and heavier, resulting in the power of every knife becoming stronger and stronger. As the blows rained down a storm, it was getting harder for the tiny swords to defend against it. Because his sword control technique was personally taught by Border Dragon City Lord, and because of his extremely intricate sword skills, he was able to defeat so many martial arts practitioners in Great Ruins. His sword skills could defend against Qin Mu's knife, but the power from the knife was gradually exceeding the limit he could defend against. This means that the density of Qin Mu's vital qi was even higher than his. The reason why he was able to block the strikes earlier was that Qin Mu's vital qi wasn't completely mobilized. The more strikes Qin Mu gave, the more vital qi was being mobilized, resulting in his attacks becoming stronger and stronger. Young Master Tingyue's face was becoming redder and redder as if blood was going to drip out. The power from Qin Mu's knife was simply too powerful, causing the range to execute his 8 tiny swords to become smaller and smaller. The swords and knife of both grew faster and faster. Their footsteps were also moving more and more rapidly in the center of the platform. As they circled around each other, the speed of their attacks was dazzling. Suddenly, Qin Mu's body closed in on Fu Tingyue's body. Fu Tingwei was startled and his scalp turned numb. A sure kill battle technique? He knew about the sure kill battle techniques. Once one was closed in by a practitioner cultivating battle techniques, it means that the opponent was about to unleash him sure kill move. Crap! In River Suppression Floor, Fu Yundi's expression changed hugely as he immediately rose up and pounced towards the platform on the lake through the air. At the same time, every muscle on Qin Mu's body convulsed frantically like a poisonous dragon and a snake intertwining each other, providing incomparable strength to his body. His twitching muscles and tendons made him sense every movement his opponent was making, every path and mobilization of strength. Every action and reaction of his opponent was reflected in his mind. A cold gaze flashed across Qin Mu's eyes. The sure kill skill of the pig, slaughtering knife skill. Raising the knife from forbidden. Raising the knife from forbidden, the vehicles and horses rumbled like thunder. Entering the palace alone, out with the king's head in his hand. The muscles in Qin Mu's entire body twitched. Pig's slaughtering knife went from his right hand to his left hand as he held it in a reverse grip. With an upward arc, the knife passed through two tiny swords, then upwards from young Master Donghua's crotch. A simple raise of a knife split open the belly like slaughtering a pig. That was Butcher's pig slaughter knife skill. At the same time, two tiny swords stabbed towards Qin Mu's eyes. With a flick of his fingers on the right hand, his fingertips got pierced open, but the two tiny swords were also flicked away. Boom! A deafening bang sounded out from the river suppression floor behind Qin Mu. The entire building was split into halves by an indescribable power. The tall building was split into halves and collapsed into the lake, splashing waves towards the shore. The water extinguished countless of lanterns on the maiden's hands, raising a series of astonished screams. Fu Yundi's face turned green as he stood on the ruins of river suppression floor. He gritted his teeth as blood stains dripped from the corner of his mouth. When he urgently tried to save his son just now, he was intercepted by Heavenly Devil Cult Mistress before he could even move out of the building. In his hurry, he took the blow head-on and got severely injured by Cult Mistress. It was a small matter being injured, but he wasn't able to save his son. In front of him, Cult Mistress raised her hand calmly to comb her hair and smiled. "City Lord, it's a battle between the younger generation, yet you personally interfered. Isn't that against the rules? Luckily, I had stopped you in time before City Lord could commit a blunder." The corners of Fu Yundi's mouth twitched, and he resisted the blood that was welling up in his throat. Swallowing the blood back into his stomach, he gave a forced smile. "Cult Mistress is right. My son's skill is inferior to him." The corners of his eyes twitched sinisterly. He deserved to die. "I was anxious just now and made a fool out of myself." On the platform on the lake, Qin Mu sheathed his knife and stood upright. "My knife is called Pig Slaughtering Knife." His twitching muscles gradually calmed down, and he said indifferently, "Young Master Tingwei, you aren't bad for injuring two of my fingers." In front of him, a blood streak appeared from Fu Tingyue's belly and extended upwards. The blood streak rose higher and higher, coming to the throat, then to the nose and forehead. His chest then split open and his entire body separated into halves, spilling his blood all over on the floor. Qin Mu took big strides to the middle-aged man who was in a daze and grabbed the coin pouch on the tray. The middle-aged man had an ashen expression and suddenly grabbed Qin Mu's arm and shouted, "You've killed young Master Tingwei." SWCCH. With a swing of his knife, Qin Mu beheaded the man. Turning around, he shook the pig slaughtering knife to shake off the bloodstains and returned it back into the sheath. He then walked back to the collapsed river suppression floor. A plop sounded behind him as the corpse of the middle-aged man fell into the lake. It was then following by the churning sounds of the water as the fish monsters scrambled to grab a bite of the corpse. Qin Mu stepped on water and reached the river suppression floor that was raised to the ground. He raised his head to look at the green-faced Fu Yundi as well as the astonished face of everyone around. The youth gave a sincere smile and handed over the coin pouch to Fu Yundi, who was in front of him, while saying, "City Lord, here's 100 dragon coins. This is my payment." The corners of Fu Yundi's eyes twitched, and he didn't stretch his hand out. "I'm not used to owing someone a favor. Since I have eaten the meal City Lord had provided, I must pay you back even if City Lord doesn't want to accept it. Us abandoned people of Great Ruins might be poor, but we still have our own integrity." With a radiant smile, Qin Mu let go of the coin pouch. As the coin pouch dropped to the floor, the dragon coins rolled out from the coin pouch and were scattered everywhere. Some even rolled into the lake from the cracks on the floor. "Now that I've settled my bill, it's time for me to return. City Lord, everyone, I would have to ask to be excused." He moved back a few steps and turned to leave. As he stepped on the ripples, he laughed heartily. "With heroes seated and drunk on wine, I slaughtered the sun to pay the bill. Delightful, delightful." Ling Yuxiu blinked her bright and beautiful eyes, wanting to call him back, but she held herself back. After all, she was a guest in the City Lord's manor. Even though she was a noble guest, She was still the one who had brought Qin Mu into City Lord's manor. Now that Qin Mu had killed the City Lord's son in front of everyone, it wasn't good for her to have too many connections with Qin Mu. Cult Mistress stood in front of Fu Yundi and blocked his gaze that was locked on Qin Mu. She then smiled. Since no one dares to take away the great educational heavenly devil scriptures, I shall continue to keep it. Farewell. When she was done, her body flashed and vanished. Trying to leave. Venerable He shouted and rushed out to chase Cult Mistress, along with the yellow-faced woman, White Brow Elder, and the rest of the people. Fu Yundi hesitated for a moment and called a divine arts practitioner over, ordering him quickly, bring men to follow that youth and kill him to take revenge for Ware. Also, find people to bury Ware. Finished with his orders, he also went in the direction where Cult Mistress had left. Compared to the revenge of his own son, the great educational heavenly devil scriptures was much more important. Ling Yuxiu stood up quietly and tried to sneak out of the ruins of River Suppression Floor when Qin Feiyue's towering figure appeared behind her. Your Highness, stop fooling around. With a faint gaze in his eyes, Qin Feiyue said, the Imperial Preceptor's army is near. Ling Yuxiu became disappointed and grumbled, I haven't had enough fun coming out this time. With a gentle gaze, Qin Feiyue spoke to her gently, if 7th Princess admires that youth, when Great Ruins becomes part of Eternal Peace Empire's land, you can just summon him into the palace and give him the title of a eunuch. This way, he can often accompany the 7th Princess. A night in the Border Dragon City was bound to be lively. There's someone stalking me. When Qin Mu left the City Lord's manor, he immediately felt there was someone stalking him. The divine arts practitioners from City Lord's manor had no intention of hiding their presence. They must have felt that there was no need to hide their presence in front of a little martial arts practitioner. Therefore, they simply stalked him openly. At this moment in Border Dragon City, there were festooned cars parading on the street. The merchants in the city decorated festooned cars that were over a dozen yards high. The festooned cars were decorated in the shapes of huge strange beasts and various shapes of gods and devils. On the festooned cars were female dancers dancing gracefully. The dancers were also gorgeously dressed in the attire of the stone statues in the various village. As Qin Mu walked on the festoon street, it was like he had entered a world of gods and devils dancing. The festoon street was making a deafening noise, and there were people everywhere squeezing and pushing each other. Both sides of the street were adorned with lanterns and huge stone pillars. On top of the pillars were stone basins that were filled with kerosene that was blazing furiously. There were also people walking on stilts that were over 30 yards tall. They could cross 20 yards in a single step, and the practitioners on stilts were also bearing a fire torch with a kerosene bottle gourd in their other hand. Blowing a mouthful of kerosene to the fire torch, they could spew out fire snakes that were several yards long. It was bustling and flourishing, yet it still had the wildness of Great Ruins. Qin Mu walked into the crowd, and suddenly the sky became extremely bright. Fine lines had unknowingly filled the sky and intertwined each other. The fine lines suddenly swelled up one by one into huge silver dragons and swam rapidly around in the skies of the festoon street. The silver dragons swam around, and could be seen that they were formed from countless of letters. When they swam around, they would give off a loud and clear devil voice that was cryptic and abstruse. Bang, bang. Violent tremors traveled out along with the brilliant rays that shot into the sky. Those rays of light rushed into the darkness above Border Dragon City and were instantly absorbed by the darkness without creating even a single billow. Even monstrous impacts when entering the darkness was like a clay ox entering the sea, disappearing without a trace. The crowd below became even more lively as they cheered loudly. They would never have thought that it wasn't fireworks, but the battles of strong practitioners happening above them. Luckily, the impact was towards the darkness in the sky, otherwise many people below would have died. The silver dragons traveled back and forth, and a few terrifying figures appeared among the light-like gods and devils. It was Border Dragon City Lord Fu Yundi, Venerable He, yellow-faced woman, and the rest clashing each other in the sky. Qin Mu was also weaving quickly through the crowd, as this wasn't a safe place to be. Even though the impacts created by the strong practitioners were all towards the sky, What if the impacts came downwards? Blood would definitely flow like a river, and countless of people would turn into corpses. The rumbles of thunder sounded above Border Dragon City, rolling around at a great speed. The thunder was sometimes in the east of the city, while other times they were in the west of the city, moving to and fro as fast as lightning. Behind him, the divine arts practitioners from the City Lord's Manor continued to chase after him. Even as Qinmu tunneled around the crowd, he wasn't able to shake them off. Tonight's encounter sure is weird. However, I still created trouble by not resisting my murderous intent and killing the City Lord's son. I must quickly inform Granny and Grandpa Blind to leave this place as early as possible. Qinmu was about to hasten his footstep when he heard a dragon roar from behind him. A divine arts practitioner with a green dragon coiling around his body pounced on him. He was still over 20 yards away from Qinmu when the green dragon weaved through the crowd and was close to pinning Qinmu down. Qinmu was about to dodge when a roll of white silk hanging down the building at the side of the street wrapped itself around the neck of the divine arts practitioner, pulling him up from the crowd and pulling him into the room of the building. In the building, a few women at the prime of youth had hidden knives in their sleeves as they stabbed them towards the divine arts practitioner's chest. Qinmu raised his head and looked. They were the few big sisters that previously called him up to play with them when he had first entered the city. He continued to walk forward and passed by an alley. In the alley was a divine arts practitioner wearing a bamboo hat whose body shook when he saw Qinmu passing by. From the alley, towering waves appeared from emptiness. The huge waves like huge snakes as they opened their jaws to bite down on Qinmu. There were silver fish inside the huge fish that were probably spirit weapons. And at this moment, there was a blacksmith workshop opposite the alley where the blacksmith was a giant that was 20 yards tall. He was smithing a fine steel long knife. The knife handle was 5 yards long while the blade was 6 yards long. The giant grabbed the long knife and pierced it through the wall to the alley, spearing the divine arts practitioner wearing the bamboo hat and nailed him to the wall. The giant blacksmith then pulled out his knife and wiped away the bloodstains. He then continued to forge the knife in the blazing flames of the forge. Qinmu was stunned for words and continued to walk forward. With the clamoring of the gongs and drums in the festoon street, figures leaped quickly as if they were flying on the roof of the houses on both sides. They were the divine arts practitioners of City Lord's Manor, and they quickly closed in on Qinmu. One of the divine arts practitioners leaped down, and before he could even land on the ground, a snake in the basket of a snake charmer suddenly stretched out its head. The snakehead suddenly became extremely huge and swallowed the divine arts practitioner that leaped down from the sky. Its head then shrunk back to normal and returned to its basket. Other few divine arts practitioners landed on the ground and weaved among the crowd. One of them passed by a wine shop, and the waiter inside was looking at the festooned cars happily. Suddenly, the wine shop waiter carried a huge wine jug and dunked it on the head of the divine arts practitioner. When the divine arts practitioner entered the wine jug, his bones and flesh immediately melted, turning him into a jug of wine. The wine shop waiter placed the wine jug properly and sealed the mouth of the jug. The other few divine arts practitioners from City Lord's Manor met a drunkard in a crowd. The drunkard spewed fire at them and turned them into ashes. Some of them were assassinated and were sliced at their throats. Some were carried into the festooned cars by the dancers and vanished without a trace. As Qinmu walked down the street, his heart was bewildered when he saw such a sight. There was quite a number of divine arts practitioners who came to hunt him down from the City Lord's Manor, but they had all died without a sound in the crowd. Who are the people helping me? Are they the Heavenly Devil Cult? Does Heavenly Devil Cult have such a great power in the city? He came to the inn and was about to go in when he suddenly saw Blind. Beside the inn was a gambling den, and Blind was currently being carried out by 2 men in black. He was then thrown onto the floor. Qinmu immediately went over, and Blind had climbed up by himself. He patted his butt and shouted towards the gambling den, "My bamboo cane." The doors of the gambling den creaked open, and a bamboo cane was thrown out that hit Blind's head. Blind picked up his bamboo cane and smiled. "I'm unlucky this time. I promise that next time all of you won't see how I cheat. I will definitely win back all my money." "Moor, is it you?" Come to say, I've met quite an interesting sight today. I saw a big hen dressing up prettily and going out to have fun. There was also a small rooster following her to have fun. Qinmu was bewildered. They are just two birds. What's so weird about them? Grandpa Blind, let us return to the inn. When both of them returned to the inn, Granny C's astonished cry sounded out. Qinmu immediately barged in to see Granny C holding up a coin pouch in astonishment. Qinmu stared blankly and immediately pushed the window open. Looking outside, he still saw the silver dragons transformed from the great educational heavenly devil scriptures fighting with the strong practitioners outside. Turning his head back, he still saw Granny C in the room, making him very puzzled. Could it be that the cult mistress I've met in the City Lord's manor isn't Granny C? Qinmu's heart grew increasingly puzzled and he smiled. Did Granny just return? I've brought some food back for you and Grandpa Blind. He then took out the oil paper and placed it on the table to open it up. Granny C's blurry eyes revealed a moved expression and she sat down, trembling. She smiled and said, "Moor sure is filial. What's going on with that sack of dragon coins?" Qinmu looked at her eyes and was bewildered. Granny C's gaze was very similar to the cult mistress's gaze. Even the smell of the rouge was the same. However, why were there still silver dragons transformed by the great educational heavenly devil scriptures? He composed himself and told them about his encounter in the little alley. Granny C had a queer expression as she stammered, "Why you use a single dragon coin to earn over 3,000 dragon coins? If Granny knew that you had so much money earlier, I would have gone and indulged myself instead of going to look for a free meal." Qinmu told them about how he met the beautiful woman in the City Lord's manor and said, "Granny, I have killed the City Lord's son. It isn't suitable for us to stay here for long. We need to leave as soon as possible." Granny C pulled out the jade hairpin from her head and beckoned her hand. Suddenly a fine thread came flying in from outside. This thread automatically coiled themselves around the jade hairpin and turned into a ball of thread in just a few seconds. She threw the ball of thread into her basket and smiled. "I've turned the Border Dragon City Lord's mistress into a cow and you've killed their son. He sure is unlucky. However, there are more unlucky things waiting for him. He has committed too much evil and karma is waiting to strike. Since you have earned these dragon coins, you can keep them for yourself. They may be of use in the future." World-shaking roars came from outside. Among them was Venerable Hay shouting, "Cult mistress has escaped. Quickly search all the areas and all of you must search her out. Outside is filled with darkness. The demoness couldn't have escaped out of the city." Blind leaned his ears to hear the commotion outside and suddenly said, "That little general with the surname Qin is staying here and not leaving. With the topographic map of Surging River, he's clearly waiting for Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is planning to move his army into Great Ruins. Border Dragon City would be the first to bear the brunt. Since Little General Qin is staying in City Lord's manor, it means that Border Dragon City Lord Fuyundi had come to terms with him. When the time comes, Border Dragon City would be the first stronghold for them to invade Great Ruins. This city is very big and could hold up to 10,000 soldiers and horses." Granny C beamed, "Therefore Fuyundi have to die." Blind nodded his head and said, "He must die. Moor has killed his son, so if Moor leaves the city, he will definitely catch up to him. That would be the day he dies. Great Ruins isn't a place where Imperial Preceptor can set his foot in, so he better scram back where he had come from." Qinmu looked at Blind and then looked at Granny C. He didn't know what they were planning. However, it was also weird. Granny C had never brought Blind into the city in the past, yet she brought him this time. Qinmu had thought nothing about this earlier, but now that he was thinking about it, there was something strange going on here. If Blind was always in the gambling den and didn't leave, how did he know what had happened in the City Lord's manor? Or was Blind in the City Lord's manor as well? Sleep early, Moor. Maybe Granny will become the Border Dragon City Lord tomorrow. Qinmu slept outside while Granny C slept in the inner room. Just as Qinmu was getting sleepy, he suddenly heard Granny C rolling on her bed and whispering to herself, "I'm so excited that I can't sleep. Not only will I be bringing home the dragon pillars of Border Dragon City, the whole city will have the surname C tomorrow. This is bad. I really can't fall asleep. He. Chinmu was bewildered. Why isn't Granny's back hunched anymore? She seemed to be rolling around excitedly on her bed. The next day, Chinmu woke up and realized Granny C wasn't in her room anymore, but breakfast was already prepared. The youth washed up and ate breakfast before going downstairs to look for Granny C and Blind. Both of them had already prepped the cow cart and loaded the seasonings and fabric they had bought onto the cart. What puzzled Chinmu was that Blind was harnessing 3 bullocks in front of the cart. There were also another 3 big bullocks following behind the cow cart. All 6 bullocks looked at Chinmu and fear could be seen in their eyes as they shivered. "Granny, didn't we sold all 6 cows?" Chinmu questioned. Granny C yawned and slowly said, "I simply found it hard to fall asleep yesterday night. Therefore, Granny went out and bought another 6 cows." Chinmu was skeptical and saw the 6 big bullocks shaking their heads. He didn't know what they were trying to say as they could only moo. It was still early morning when the cow cart was driven out of the city. There were already some horse carts on the road as the villagers who came into the city to trade took advantage of the early morning to return to their villages, hoping that they could make it back before nightfall. Chinmu drove the cart to the pier and the river was already churning. There were numerous villagers worshipping the river gods and summoning the river carriers. Beside the shore, the big-nosed river carriers were enjoying the smell of the incense and puffing out big rings of smoke. Some river carriers were already carrying villagers who were returning from a rewarding trip. Blind also offered incenses at the riverside to summon a river carrier. He fed it some food and Chinmu drove the cow cart onto the back of the river carrier. The huge beast started to swim upstream. The river flowed majestically from the west to the east. When they came, they floated down from upstream. Now that they were going upstream from downstream, the water resistance ought to be very strong. However, the river carrier's speed was no slower than when it was floating down. With this speed, they only need to rest a night at Grandma Temple and will return to disabled elderly village the next day. Unknowingly, they had traveled 17 miles on the river. Granny C's expression moved slightly. Carrying her basket, she smiled and said, "My work is here." "Blind, you two move on ahead." Blind nodded and warned, "Be careful." Granny C leaped and suddenly vanished without a trace. Chinmu looked upwards and saw Granny C in the air without dropping down for quite a long time. Blind, on the other hand, was used to it and was not concerned as he stood upright with his cane, facing the wind. Not long after, Chinmu suddenly saw that in the sky behind them, a cloud suddenly became blood red. Bloody rain then started to pour from the sky, staining surging river scarlet red. What happened in the sky? Just as he was thinking about it, a head dropped down from the bloody cloud and into the river. Chinmu's hair stood on their ends. He saw the face clearly the instant the head had fallen into the river. It was the yellow-faced woman who was in City Lord's manor. Chinmu raised his head. What exactly happened up in that cloud? That rain came quickly and went away quickly as well. The bloody rain that stained the river red seemed like it was only an illusion. As the river water flowed downstream, it soon regained its clarity. Chinmu washed off the blood stains on his body. He waited for quite some time, but Granny C still didn't appear. However, Blind was still calm and wasn't even the slightest worried. Right at this moment, Chinmu suddenly felt a wave of force that made his heart palpitated. Coming from the downstream of surging river, it was world-shaking and extremely terrifying. Even the river carrier under their feet became uneasy and increased its speed to swim upstream. Blind's ears suddenly twitched and he shouted, "Moor, get a stable footing and don't fall into the river." Chinmu immediately got a stable footing. It was as if his feet grew roots into the back of the river carrier. Only now did he hear a peculiar whooshing sound coming from his back, making him dumbstruck as he turned his head to have a look. He could only see the huge river behind them rising higher and higher rapidly. The river was actually flowing in reverse from downstream to upstream. At this moment, the river surface downstream was already 30 yards over both sides of the shore. As the towering snow-white wave surged forth, it came crashing down towards them. The huge waves got closer and closer to them, and the water splashed frantically towards both sides, flooding the dense forest on both shores. The terrifying waves surged forth, and the whooshing sound turned into a world-shaking rumble, as if a few hundred thunderclaps had broken out in a valley. Qin felt a chill down his spine as he saw the excessive splashes from the huge waves fading away to reveal a huge hand. This hand was almost as wide as the river surface as it pushed mercilessly from downstream up. Blind remained calm and collected as if he didn't notice the terrifying situation behind them. The huge hand formed by the river water soon reached 300 yards behind them. At this moment, the huge hand suddenly fell apart. The huge body of water dispersed to its surroundings. The waves surging forward raised their river carrier 30 yards into the sky before landing back down again. Qin recovered from the shock and immediately grabbed onto the cow cart to prevent it from slipping into the water. Blind used his bamboo cane to poke the river carrier's head. The river carrier immediately turned its direction and swam downstream again. More, let us return to Border Dragon City. 10 miles downstream, Border Dragon City Lord Fuyundi descended from the sky and landed on the river surface with quick steps. He took 2 steps forward before stopping and looking around with a dark face. Which senior brother broke my spell? It was not a senior brother, but a senior sister. Granny C carried her little basket and walked over on the river surface. Her wrinkles creased together as she beamed. City Lord, aren't you afraid of harming the villagers of Great Ruins by creating a havoc on the river? If your attack had connected, villagers in over 30 miles would all have to die under your hands. What a great sin it would be. You're the old hag that's with that abandoned person? Fuyundi replied coldly. So you're the one who imparted the ultimate arts of the battle techniques to him so that he could kill my son? I will have to take revenge for my son's death. If you block my way, you'll die. Granny C sighed and took out a ball of thread from her basket as she said faintly, City Lord, this is the great education devil sacred book you have been anticipating for a long time. What a pity that it would be your last time seeing it. You will still be alive, but you will be sealed by me in your human skin. With me wearing your skin, I will take over Border Dragon City and meet Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Fu Yundi's pupil contracted as the ball of thread spun in Granny C's hand. The thread extended out rapidly and intertwined over the river surface. The thread turned into a huge net and Fu Yundi was caught in the net. Yesterday night when your son had died, it gave me the chance to sneak an attack on you. If you had known your place and focused on healing yourself yesterday after you were severely injured, you might still have the chance to escape today. Granny C beamed, however you are too greedy and came to chase me, wanting to steal the great educational heavenly devil scriptures, which determined your end today. Killing me with just you? Dream on. How many years have you only cultivated? Fu Yundi's body wavered and his vital chi burst forth frantically. His dense vital chi formed an 8 arms and 8 heads heavenly god behind him that could almost be passed off as real. The 8 arms and 8 heads heavenly god that was formed from his vital chi almost had a physical form. The heavenly god behind him was holding onto 8 instruments that almost formed a physical substance as well. As the Border Dragon City Lord, he naturally had an extraordinary technique. The 8-fold heavenly god technique is indeed a remarkable technique. However, it's only remarkable and it's still far from reaching the realm of God. Granny C chuckled and her skin suddenly molted away. A woman in her prime age walked out from Granny's skin. She was the peerless beauty cult mistress from City Lord's Manor. She sped along forward and the threads transformed by great educational heavenly devil scriptures traveled back and forth rapidly. Fu Yundi gave a shout and faced the palm of the beautiful cult mistress head-on. He then sneered, "See you are just merely over 100 years old. Can your magic power be stronger than mine?" Boom. Both of their palms clashed together, and Granny C was pushed back into the air. Thinking of leaving? Fu Yundi leaped into midair and suddenly felt something strange. Why did I become so light? He lowered his head and saw a man of flesh without his skin standing on the river. He looked at himself and gave out an involuntary scream. He had become a human skin himself, and the man of flesh below was also him who had his skin stripped away. The instant Granny C clashed her palm with him, the thread transformed by great educational heavenly devil scriptures tunneled into his B. Odie and sealed his 3 souls and 7 spirits in a split second before skinning him. Granny C being pushed back into the sky was actually her taking the initiative to rise into the air. With a pull of her threads, his human skin was directly pulled out from his body. Fu Yundi, you're just SOSO. Granny C raised her hand to grab this human skin and put it on herself. Her appearance and action became exactly the same as Fu Yundi. Below, Fu Yundi's skinless corpse sank into the water and was swept away by the river. Her body dropped down from the sky and landed on the river. Exactly at this time, the river carrier that was carrying Qin Mu and Blind also swam here. Border Dragon City Lord? Qin Mu's scalp turned numb and the junior protector sword at his waist gave off a crisp jingle, ready to attack anytime. Muir, I'm Granny. Out came Granny C's voice from Fu Yundi's mouth, which then became Fu Yundi's voice again that literally had no difference. Eternal Peace Empire's army should be reaching soon, am I right? When will Village Chief and the rest come? Blind turned his head and replied, they should be arriving in the city anytime soon. This time the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is coming in aggressively. Granny, now that you're acting as Fu Yundi, you cannot give the game away, otherwise, with the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's ability, he can just take your life away in one move. Can you replicate the 8-fold Heavenly God technique of Fu Yundi? Granny C's vital chi surged out, and a Heavenly God with 8 arms and 8 heads appeared behind her. It was the same as Fu Yundi's 8-fold Heavenly God technique. Qin Mu closely inspected and couldn't find any difference. The creation writings of great educational heavenly devil scriptures is indeed remarkable. No wonder it was called the technique that could become a god or a devil. Blind exclaimed in admiration, is this the heavenly god creation technique of the creation writings? Granny C nodded her head and Fu Yundi's voice came out from her mouth. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures is divided into heaven, earth, human, god, ghost, devil, and spirit writings. This is indeed heavenly god creation technique that is good at imitating other techniques. Blind became silent for a moment before saying, there are some things I shouldn't say, but Moore is already 14 years old, therefore I need to emphasize it again. Moore is now the young cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult and will have to leave Great Ruins one day. When are you imparting the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures to him? Qin Mu was also bewildered. These 2 years, Granny C had never imparted the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures to him and had never even brought it up. Granny C sighed, if I let him cultivate great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures now, it would probably twist his thoughts. The devil nature of this technique is way too intense. Blind nodded his head. Being honored as the Holy Bible of Heavenly Devil Cult and as a technique that could turn one into a god or a devil, great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures naturally had an intense devious nature. Even for an adult with matured wisdom, they may be enticed by the thousands of strange devil techniques recorded in the book and walk down the wrong path. For example, the Night Watchman who had cultivated the pre-celestial freedom technique. He had misinterpreted the cultivation method of pre-celestial freedom technique and used the method of raising a snake to absorb the pre-celestial pneuma of newly born infants, resulting in his death under Granny C and Blind's hands. Actually, if he can completely comprehend the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, cultivating this Holy Bible isn't any different from righteous techniques, and no evil would be done. However, if there's even the slightest misinterpretation, he will walk down the wrong path, though he would still be able to cultivate it. Granny C's head hurts as she said, furthermore, it would also gain a powerful strength, making it even more peculiar. However, a big flaw would be left behind. The only upper hand is that it would be fast to cultivate, which is why Heavenly Devil Cult is called Heavenly Devil Cult. When the cult was first founded, Heavenly Devil Cult was called Heavenly Saint Cult. It was rumored to be founded by the saints from heaven who decided to enlighten all living beings by imparting them techniques. However, many of the cult followers had cultivated wrongly and the techniques became more and more demonic, which was why it was later called Heavenly Devil Cult. Even though Moore always had his own ideas, I'm scared he will misinterpret the writings on the scriptures if I just handing him the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures. She immediately leaped into the air and returned to Border Dragon City. I shall go back to the city to prepare and wait for the vanguard of Eternal Peace Empire. The rest of you settle down in the city first." After some time, Qin Mu and Blind once again returned to Border Dragon City. Border Dragon City was not as bustling during the day as it is at night. However, there were still many villagers from various villages that haven't left. Qin Mu and Blind returned to that inn again, and since the inn owner was part of the Heavenly Devil cult, he had already prepared the rooms for them. Blind was excited. "Moore, let me bring you to the gambling den to see the world. Us grandpa and grandson will definitely have success and win big." Qin Mu remembered the scene where Blind got thrown out onto the street from the gambling den and shook his head. "I'm not going." Blind then mumbled, "How about you give me some dragon coins?" Qin Mu took out the coin pouch and Blind stretched his hand in to grab a bunch of coins before leaving happily with his bamboo cane. Qin Mu didn't whether to laugh or cry. Blind loved to gamble, yet he wasn't willing to use his ability and only relied on his luck to gamble with others. Since young, Qin Mu had learned sound localization and could determine any dice or domino just by listening. If Qin Mu could do it, why couldn't Blind? Furthermore, with Blind's God Mind's Eye, he can definitely win any bet he makes. However, he precisely didn't want to use his ability and rely on luck to gamble, therefore he lost whatever he bet on. Qin Mu went downstairs and the inn owner came forward with a smile. "Young cult master is leaving? Do you need subordinate to make some preparation for you?" Qin Mu shook his head. "There are ears in the inn. There's no need to address me as young cult master. You can just address me as young master." "Yes, young master." Qin Mu gave it some thought and asked, "Whose property is the gambling den next door?" The inn owner was full of smiles and replied, "It's naturally young master's property." "Does young master want to go there and have a look at your own property?" Subordinate will now go over to inform the gambling den's owner to come and serve. "My property?" Qin Mu jumped in shock and was slightly startled. He then shook his head. "There's no need for that. How many properties in Border Dragon City are mine?" The inn owner muttered to himself irresolutely and calculated. Market, gambling den, inn, restaurant, cat house, antique shop, household utensils shop, medicinal store, blacksmith workshop, weapons store. Young master, in the entire Border Dragon City, over half of them are young master's property and over half of the city's population are young master's people. Every gambling den, every brothel, every vegetable seller and butcher in the market, every tea maven in the inn, every blacksmith, every assistant and apothecary in medicinal store, every owner of the weapons store. As long as young master gives the command, they will sacrifice their lives for young master without a word. No wonder there were so many people helping me to kill the pursuers last night. Qin Mu stared with his eyes wide open and felt dizzy. After a while, he slowly said, "Tell the gambling den to not always win against the blind man who came with me. Let him win some as well, but do not to let him keep on winning. Let him win some and lose some, as long as he's happy it's fine." Understood. The inn owner stepped back and left to take care of the matter. Not long later, he brought a middle-aged man who was wearing silk clothes and a sable fur coat over. His fingers were adorned with jade rings. The inn owner paid his respects. "This is the owner of the gambling den, our sacred cult's incense master Han." Incense Master Han had a troubled expression. "Young master, it's not that subordinate don't want to let the blind man win. It's just the blind man cheated publicly with an underhanded method. If he wasn't so open about it, I would have closed an eye." Qin Mu was bewildered. How did he cheat? Incense Master Han replied, "When playing dominoes, whenever the blind man got a bad draw, he would point to the window and say there was a divine bird outside before changing his domino openly in front of everyone's eyes. In addition, the dominoes he took out from his pocket were green in color when all our dominoes are black in color. I am really helpless. May I request young master to assign me something simpler?" Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He kept silent for a moment before saying, "Let him win a few rounds. If he cheats again, then just beat him slightly softer." Subordinate understood. Incense Master Han turned around to leave and Qin Mu composed himself. The entire Border Dragon City's property is his? More than half of the people here belong to him? When did he become such a rich and powerful man in this world? Heavenly Devil Young Cult Master sure has a great name. Using this as a comparison to the 1,000 dragon coins I had earned yesterday, that really wasn't really much. He felt very weird. Was Fu Yundi the Border Dragon City Lord, or was it him? Furthermore, since Granny had killed Fu Yundi and was wearing his skin, doesn't this mean that the entire Border Dragon City was his? He had a preposterous feeling and shook his head as he walked out of the inn to stroll around. Yesterday night, he had only seen the ancient temples near the City Lord's Manor. This time, he planned to visit the dragon pillars of Border Dragon City. Border Dragon City was so big, yet these dragon pillars could protect this territory from the darkness invasion. Therefore, they should be remarkable. Qin opened his heaven's eyes and inspected the dragon pillar in front of him while exclaiming in admiration. The sculpture on the dragon pillar was a dragon god that was extremely huge. The size of the dragon was nearly as huge as the remnant of the Dragon King's bones he saw in Surging River Dragon Palace. These dragon gods coiled around the stone pillars that were 100 yards wide and were very sculpted vividly. The stone pillars were 500 yards tall, therefore one could imagine how huge the divine dragons were. Qin raised his head, and the dragon gods on the dragon pillars seemed to have turned alive. Even though the dragons seemed to look fierce, they also had a divine and majestic atmosphere. In the maps of Great Ruins, this city wasn't Border Dragon City and was Heavenly Dragon Star Palace. This was the art of a divine being, and if I could study the path of the vein lines on the sculpture, it would be a great benefit to my painting and calligraphy. I might even comprehend the technique of the divine person. Qin became exhilarated and slowly inspected the composition of the vein lines on the dragon pillar. Even though the divine being that sculpted the dragon pillars didn't wish to incorporate his technique into them, the path of the sculpture involuntarily beared the mark of his divine arts techniques. To other people, they might just be a relief sculpture, but because Qin learned calligraphy and painting from blind, he deeply understood the principle within. In the map of Great Ruins, beside the Heavenly Dragon Star Palace was the Star Sea that was no more than 70 miles away from here. Judging from the name, Heavenly Dragon Star Palace should be the place where heavenly dragons stayed. With this place being so vast, could this be the place where the dragon race gathered? The darkness invasion also turned the dragon race into ruins. Qin looked around and sighed with sorrow. Suddenly an astonished cry came from above. "Cowherd, how come you are still at Border Dragon City?" Qin heard a familiar voice and raised his head towards the voice. He saw a small head popping out from the dragon pillar, and it was the girl who brought him into the city lord's manor to eat for free. Ling Yuxiu waved her hand at him and her voice traveled. "Are you able to come up?" Qin looked at the height of the pillar and hesitated. The stone pillar was too high, and now that there's no wind to borrow strength from, he could only run up along the pillar. He could run up Mountain Cliff, but Mountain Cliff was normally 100 to 150 yards tall. He had yet to try running 500 yards vertically upwards. Qin moved back a dozen of steps. He suddenly gathered strength below his soles and ran towards the dragon pillar. In just a few steps, his speed was pushed to its maximum, and he rushed towards the dragon pillar like a flickering light. His feet then stepped on the dragon pillar like flat ground, and he sprinted upwards. His speed and burst were astonishing as he sprinted 300 over yards in one shot towards the peak of the dragon pillar. Crap, I can't make it up. Qin felt the burst of strength reaching its limit as his speed started to slow down. He was still 10 to 15 yards away from the peak of the dragon pillar. He managed to rush another 10 meters up before he ran out of strength and his body started to drop down. At this moment, a ribbon hung down from the top of the dragon pillar and coiled around his wrist. With a gentle tug, he was pulled upwards. Qin did a flip in midair and landed on the peak of the dragon pillar. Looking around, he saw that this place was actually very smooth, like a huge stone platform. A dragon's head was sculpted on the south side of the platform, which could be accessed from the stone platform. Ling Yuxiu came forward and uncoiled the ribbon on his wrist while smiling. "You actually ran up here. Didn't you know? There's a set of stairs inside the dragon pillar you can come up from." Qin looked at her ribbon and was astonished. The quality of the ribbon isn't bad. Of course. Ling Yuxiu was extremely proud of herself. This is weaved by nature fragrance silk, which are offerings to the emperor. Of course, they are of the best quality. Take a sniff. It's very fragrant. It's the fragrance of nature and would never disperse. Qinmu lowered his head to take a sniff, and there was indeed a fragrant odor. He then smiled. I also have a sweat towel that is weaved by nature fragrance silk. It has the same fragrance. Once he said that, he took out the sweat towel from his chest. Qinmu shook open the sweat towel and looked at the quality of the silk. I originally thought that your odor was fragrant and very familiar. It turned out that we are using the same kind of fabric. Ling Yuxiu looked at the sweat towel, and her face instantly turned beet red. She immediately snatched over the sweat towel in anger and embarrassment. This is mine. How come it's with you? You even treat it as a sweat towel. I'm ignoring you. The girl stomped angrily and squatted on top of the dragon's head. She rested her chin on her hands and looked far away. Qinmu was stunned. This is your sweat towel? It's not a sweat towel. Ling Yuxiu was angry. This is my. I'm ignoring you. If it's not a sweat towel, then what is it? The youth was puzzled. My grandpa cripple gave this to me and said it was used to wipe sweat. I saw that the quality was good, that's why I brought it along with me. Since it's yours, then I shall return it to you. Why must you be angry? Ling Yuxiu threw down her feminine undergarment angrily. Even if you return it to me, I don't want it. Qinmu's vital qi flew out and swept the feminine undergarment back into his hand. If you throw it down like this, other people will pick it up and use it as a sweat towel. Won't it be better to give it to me? I sweat a lot when I'm training. Ling Yuxiu got angry. Return it to me. The youth was even more bewildered. Why should I return it to you when you're going to throw it away? Isn't better to give it to me for wiping my sweat? Ling Yuxiu snatched it back and pondered. She then took out a handkerchief and passed it to him. This is a girl's personal stuff. As a man, aren't you ashamed of using it? Let me give you this handkerchief. It's also weaved from nature fragrance silk. There is still my embroidery on it. Just use this to wipe your sweat. Qinmu received the handkerchief and on it sewed a crooked pig head. That's a really ugly embroidery. Ling Yuxiu was angry and anxious. If you don't want it, then return it to me. Qinmu immediately kept it and went forward to sit beside her. You took my sweat towel. Therefore, it's natural that you should give me something in return. What you took from me was much bigger than the one you gave me. I'm still the one on the losing end. The sun had risen high up in the sky. The sunshine of early spring had a sweet warmth as the youth laid down contently and looked at the fleeting clouds in the sky. Ling Yuxiu blinked her eyes and asked, do you think that the fatty 7th young master who's chubby is good-looking? Qinmu gave it some thought and said, he's okay-looking, but he has a very strong feminine side, making him not like a man, but more like a woman. Ling Yuxiu couldn't resist stroking her hair that was hanging down the front of her chest and giggled. Do you think I'm good-looking? Qinmu looked at her seriously and said, even though your face is slightly fat, you are still pretty good-looking. Ling Yuxiu was very satisfied and asked curiously, why didn't you escape from the city after killing Fu Yundi-san and instead came back? There's something I need to do. Qinmu closed his eyes and said indifferently, the Eternal Peace Empire's great army is reaching here soon. I'm here to stop the invasion of Eternal Peace Empire. Ling Yuxiu's heart slightly jolted. She had a serious expression and slowly said, you know you are trying to strike a stone with an egg? The commoners of Eternal Peace Empire lived in peace and worked happily. Every sect and every clan followed the rules of the imperial family and kept our entire empire in order. In our borders, there isn't any war and there are only some small conflicts, so how can it be compared to Great Ruins? How disorderly is Great Ruins? The people here have no way to make a living and are always murdering each other. They don't even know when their next meal will be. Coming to Great Ruins, I have seen countless of people selling their sons and daughters. Their situation was extremely pitiful. The Eternal Peace Empire's great army is then the righteous troops. Therefore, you should give up on resisting and take the initiative to welcome Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Qinmu opened his eyes with a profound gaze. The people of Great Ruins doesn't want to live here either, but I've heard that the people of Great Ruins are called people abandoned by gods. If they leave Great Ruins, they will be captured at the borders of Eternal Peace Empire. Some will be executed straight away, and others will be sold off as slaves to mine ores, dead within the next few years. He sat up and his fingers were interlocked in front of his knees. He had a calm expression. They only wanted to live better, yet they would only die faster by going over to eternal peace. Wouldn't it be better for them to live in great ruins where they could still get by? If the Eternal Peace Empire was to invade great ruins, how would they treat us, the people abandoned by gods? Will they kill us or make us slaves? Sister Yushio, the Emperor of Eternal Peace Empire and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, doesn't have the commoners here in their eyes, but only the land abandoned by gods. Abandoned people lived in the land abandoned by gods and have to face the darkness invasion every night. Every morning they would also have to face all kinds of danger during hunting, but at least they could still live and let their children survive. However, if Eternal Peace Empire were to conquer here, they won't even have a place to live in anymore. Ling Yushio stared blankly. She has never thought about things like this. She has only felt that the Eternal Peace Empire was righteous and never thought about what would happen to the people here. She couldn't resist asking, "Did you know? If you fight against the Eternal Peace Empire's great army, only death is waiting for you. There is no chance of surviving." Qinmu revealed a radiant smile that was full of confidence. He raised his head towards the east. "No. The Emperor of Eternal Peace Empire and Imperial Preceptor will encounter a cropper here. They will face an insurmountable wall here, and their forces will be crippled. They don't know what lies in this mysterious lands and what they'll face. Eternal Peace's undefeatable legend will have to end here today." Ling Yushio rose up and said angrily, "You stubborn mule. Why bother when you'll definitely die in the city?" Qinmu rose and looked directly into her eyes. "The abandoned people will only face death when they reach Eternal Peace Empire. Now that the Eternal Peace Empire is planning on invading here and converting here into the lands of Eternal Peace, there is no doubt that the abandoned people will die. Since we'll definitely die if we don't fight back, why can't the abandoned people fight back to have a chance at survival?" Ling Yushio got flustered by his gaze and walked down the dragon's head back onto the platform. She turned her head to look at him and gritted her teeth. "I'm from Eternal Peace Empire, and my motive here this time is to take over the territory of Great Ruins, to make this place part of Eternal Peace Empire's territory." Qinmu nodded his head. Ling Yushio continued, "It's impossible for me to betray Eternal Peace. Anyone who opposes Eternal Peace Empire will be my enemy." Qinmu nodded his head again. "I'm an abandoned people, and I would never betray Great Ruins." Ling Yushio turned and walked towards the stairs at the platform. Her figure vanished, but her voice traveled out from the inside of the stone pillar. "If I meet you in battle, I won't show any mercy." Qinmu looked afar and saw the smoke in the distance that was like a dense fog shrouding dozens of miles that was moving over here. He muttered, "Me too." In the dense fog, thousands of behemoths were paving the way forward. These behemoths had long tusks and bodies like mountains. Their bodies were covered with bone armor and were carrying heavy stuff, yet their speed wasn't slow. When they're walking, their bone armor collided with each other and gave off clattering sounds. Behind the behemoths were a vast army as far as eyes got to see. The army gave off an austere atmosphere and had fluttering gonfalons. In the middle of the army, war chariots drove forward, and there were also ships flying in the sky. The ships were filled with soldiers, and at the core of every ship were over a dozen apothecaries making pellets and medicines in a frenzy. There were also boys continuously feeding spirit pellets and miraculous medicines into the great furnace of the ship. When those spirit pellets and miraculous medicines were tossed into the great furnace, they immediately turned into violent magic power and rushed out from the great furnace and into the two sculptures of the blast beasts at the aft part of the ship. The violent blast of air spurted out from the sculptures of the blast beasts caused the ship to rise up and fly forward. Eternal Peace Empire's great army traveled over from the borders, and these were just the vanguards. There was an even stronger force gathered at the borders. Back there, the gonfalons of Imperial Preceptor fluttered. Qinmu looked at the Eternal Peace Empire's great army that was coming closer, and his heart dropped. Every soldier in the army was a practitioner who experienced harsh battles. The so-called troops of wolves and tigers were referring to such a great army exactly. Against such a great army, it was as if the border dragon city seemed to be extremely stable, had become a piece of paper that could be broken through easily. Eternal Peace Empire. Qinmu suppressed the shock in his heart and muttered. Village chief once said that Eternal Peace Empire was a sect that was disguised as an empire. The way Qinmu sees it, an empire sure had greater power than a sect, having a greater cohesion and an even greater explosive force. When a sect becomes a strict and structured organization consisting of a faultless official system and a country that's training their next generation, how powerful will they become? Becoming an empire was the final path a sect needed to take to expand. In the city lord's manor, Granny C, who was wearing Fu Yundi's skin, put her hands behind her, and the eightfold heavenly god appeared behind her, making border dragon city lord Fu Yundi seemed bold and overbearing. Imperial preceptor is finally here. In front of the gambling den, Blind propped himself up with his cane and bent an ear to the sound of the moving army that was coming closer and closer. At the market entrance, a butcher who only had the upper half of his body was sharpening his knife. In the bookstore on the opposite street, a deaf man who was wearing iron ears was painting in the courtyard, his brush being 3 yards long. Deaf painted crazily like a maniac, and a lightning cloud painting that was several yards long rose up into the sky after he was done. The painting rose into the sky and gradually disappeared. In a split second, the sky was filled with thunderous clouds and numerous bolts of lightning came down from the sky, giving off crackling sounds. On the dragon pillar, Qinmu raised his head and saw that the area that was shrouded by thunderous clouds which were getting wider and wider as it spread outwards. It was like a huge vortex with countless of bolts of lightning striking down continuously, but they were still circling around the vortex. The thunderous clouds were moving towards the vanguard of Eternal Peace Empire. A lightning suddenly struck the ground and sparks instantly scattered all around like golden snakes, giving off a loud world-shaking sound at the same time. What followed was multiple bolts of lightning that seemed to have found their target. As they struck down from the sky, the scene was like numerous huge plows from the sky plowing down onto the great army of Eternal Peace Empire. Boom, boom, boom. Numerous bolts of lightning contacted the vanguard of Eternal Peace Empire, and in less than a breath's time, the behemoths were fried into crisps. With the lightning striking the behemoths, some behemoths' bellies split open as if they were sliced by sharp swords. The behemoths cried out in pain and fled in all directions. Some even ran backward and stomped many soldiers to death during their stampede. The rolling thunder and lightning soon caught up to the army, throwing the soldiers and the cavalries into disarray. It was unknown how many soldiers had been struck by the lightning and died on the spot. A ship was struck by multiple lightning and was instantly set ablaze. The furnaces in the core of the ship exploded, turning the apothecaries and the boys in the medicine room into flaming people. The violent medicinal energy in the medicine furnace rushed out from the medicine room and into the great furnace. The great furnace was unable to convert the terrifying amount of medicinal energy in time and exploded with a bang. The huge ship instantly shattered into pieces, disintegrating in the sky. There were also some ships that had their great furnaces destroyed and had no more propulsion, causing them to drop down from the sky with a trail of thick billowing smoke, crushing countless of soldiers who were unable to escape in time. Originally, Eternal Peace Empire had a pressurizing atmosphere on the city, but now its grandeur was all gone. All that was left was chaos. General Liu, these thunderous clouds are peculiar. It's as if they are coming for our Eternal Peace Army. A scout came to report urgently. Reaching the middle army, he genuflected and cupped his hands. The thunderous clouds shrouded a radius of 30 miles, and there's not a single cloud outside 30 miles. That General Liu was majestic and sturdy. A radiant light flashed across his eyes and said solemnly, "Let the Wind Marquis troop move out and blow away the thunderous clouds." Understood. Passed down the general's order to blow away the thunderous clouds. Behind him, the soldiers of a troop were wearing strange clothing and all had huge bottle gourds that were half the height of a human on their backs. When all the soldiers opened their mouths of the bottle gourds, black wind instantly soared into the sky from the bottle gourd. The troop executed their vital chi and pointed their fingers, causing the black wind to whistle and swell up, turning into violent gusts that swept toward the thunderous clouds in the sky. However, at this moment, at the bookstore in the city, Def's second painting was ready. It was a painting of tornadoes and storms. With a flick of his brush, the tornado storm painting rose into the sky and vanished. Just as the Wind Marquee Troupe cast their spells to use the black wind to blow away the thunderous clouds, the situation suddenly changed unexpectedly. From the thunderous clouds, huge tornadoes that were like the tails of divine dragons hung down and were thrust into the numerous soldiers of the Great Army. There wasn't a single tornado, but over a dozen of tornadoes sweeping up the Wind Marquee Troupe's black wind, fusing them into the tornadoes and increasing the tornado's power. Numerous soldiers were swept into the air and flailed helplessly. What's even more terrifying was when these soldiers were swept into midair, numerous bolts of lightning struck down and burned their bodies into crisps. It didn't matter if they were martial arts practitioners or divine arts practitioners, they were all helpless against the power of nature. The wind and lightning raged and was followed by a shower pouring down from the sky, soaking the Eternal Peace Empire's army thoroughly. When the lightning struck down onto the soaked soldiers and landed on the ground soaked by water, it baselessly increased the power of the lightning. The bodies of numerous people shuddered and became distorted, burning them into crisps. Demons and monsters, how impudent. Black Tortoise Troop, raise your shield. General Lu flew into a rage and slammed both his hands down. His body soared into the air and slaughtered towards the thunderous clouds in midair. Moving to and fro, he destroyed the tornadoes directly. Bolts of lightning struck towards him, but before the lightning could reach him, it was deflected away by the glow given off by the armor, disallowing the lightning to hit his body. Below, the Black Tortoise Troop shouted in unison, and their vital chi turned into huge shields that soared into the air. The vital chi shields floated 30 over yards above the various troops that helped to cover them from the shower. The bolts of lightning were also blocked by the Black Tortoise's shield, pacifying the hearts of the troops. The military officers of various troops immediately reorganized their forces and slew all the army deserters, regrouping after their setback. In Border Dragon City, another huge painting flew into the sky. However, it was 100 demons painting. The 100 demons painting slowly disappeared into the sky and vanished without a trace. After it disappeared, vicious-looking devil gods slew their way out from the thunderous clouds and surrounded General Lu to slaughter his men. General Lu's scalp turned numb, and he struggled with his life to defend, yet at this moment, another huge painting flew out from Border Dragon City. General Lu sneaked a glance towards it only to be frightened stiff. It was a falling meteor painting, and in the painting where numerous meteors were falling from the sky. Fall back. Just as General Lu shouted, the meteorological phenomenon in the sky suddenly changed. Huge meteors with blazing tails trailing behind them fell from the sky, tearing through the heavens and smashing toward the Eternal Peace Empire's great army. The paintings of one man that could defend against 1,000,000 mighty soldiers. This makes me think of one person. At the border between Eternal Peace Empire and Great Ruins, in the city gate tower at the border, a middle-aged man with long and shapely eyebrows stood there. Behind him were generals. The middle-aged man was Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and even when the Eternal Peace Empire's great army landed in a critical situation, he remained unmoved and calmly said, back when Heavenly Painting Country was still around. The Heavenly Painting Crown Prince was unmatched in his generation and had peerless talent. He was the most beautiful man in Heavenly Painting Country and also the most talented. However, he was enthralled in painting and calligraphy. He once said he didn't care about the matters of the world and only focused on reading the holy books. When Military Wolf Country invaded and wanted to wipe out Heavenly Painting Country, the Heavenly Painting Country couldn't resist their attacks. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Painting Crown Prince was still enthralled in his path of painting, and when he woke up, Military Wolf Country had breached the country and was slaughtering his people. His father, the Emperor of Heavenly Painting Country, was also killed and had his head paraded around by the soldiers. Behind him, the generals of Eternal Peace Empire listened silently and didn't open their mouths. A sword at the waist of a general suddenly soared into the air and transformed into a ray of light that flew into the distance. It flew straight for the 100 demons and devil gods in the thick clouds. Then the heavenly painting crown prince turned crazy. The long eyebrow Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had a deep gaze as he continued. His 2 ears didn't care about listening to the matters of the world that caused the destruction of his country, so what good were these ears? He was an extreme person and bawled on the street. He sliced off his ears and pierced his eardrums. He used the blood of his people to draw and drew out hell. He drew the 18 levels of hell. Afterwards, the entire country of Heavenly Painting Country vanished and became a bottomless abyss. The millions of soldiers of Military Wolf Country fell into the black abyss and became a part of hell, getting eaten by the demon gods of hell. Some of the strong practitioners tried to escape, but they were captured by the devil gods and dragged back into hell. After that battle, it was the end for both Heavenly Painting Country and Military Wolf Country. The 2 countries perished and the Heavenly Painting Crown Prince had vanished as well. I've been to the ruins of Heavenly Painting Country and jumped into the black abyss. I took a walk around the 18 levels of hell and saw his painting of the 18 levels of hell. I could deeply feel the sorrow and helplessness in that crown prince's heart. At the same time, I also felt pity for his talent. That was why I had requested the emperor to build a pavilion of Art Saint. In fact, there's nobody more suitable than the Heavenly Painting Crown Prince to be the Art Saint. I thought I would never see the Art Saint in my life, and I never would have thought I'd see him again at the borders of great ruins. What a pity he has become our Eternal Peace's enemy. As he spoke, the thunderous clouds, lightning, 100 demons, tornadoes, and storm all vanished as ink fell from the sky. The scene caused the soldiers of Eternal Peace shudder in fear. The terrifying phenomenon that had caused so many of their deaths was actually just some ink. City Lord, there's a sorcerer causing havoc in the city. In Border Dragon City, Qin Feiyue saw the phenomenon in the sky and immediately rushed into the City Lord's manor. He found Granny C and reported, "This sorcerer is casting spells to stop the advance of our Eternal Peace's great army. His power is spectacular and is hidden in the bookstore in the city. May I request City Lord to go forth and kill this sorcerer?" Granny C had a solemn expression and said coldly, "There's such a sorcerer? How dare he create havoc in my territory? What guts? Don't worry, little General Qin. I shall go execute him right now." When she was done, she rushed toward the bookstore aggressively. Qin Feiyue immediately followed behind. However, by the time he reached the bookstore, the building was already empty. Granny C frowned and immediately ordered loudly, "Seal off the entire city and search for the sorcerer. Move all the people in the city to the city plaza. I would like to see who dares to cause mischief under my eyes." The divine arts practitioners of City Lord's Manor received the orders and immediately went to chase everyone in the city, including the merchants, to the city plaza. Qin Feiyue also frowned. Not being able to find the sorcerer who was creating havoc made him feel uneasy. "There's no need to worry, little General Qin. This is my city. No demon nor monster can create havoc here." Granny C, who was wearing Fuyundi's skin, smiled. "Now that we have gathered everyone together, no matter which sorcerer it is who is remarkable at hiding, will not escape the grasp of my hand. Feel free to invite the Imperial Army. There are too many lawless people in Great Ruins who are in need of a teaching. Come to think of it, I've heard of the distinguished name of Imperial Preceptor and even admire him greatly. I can't wait to see Imperial Preceptor immediately and listen to his teachings." Qin Feiyue suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and smiled faintly. "Please be at ease, City Lord. Imperial Preceptor has always dealt rewards and punishments clearly. Since that City Lord has done a great merit for Eternal Peace Empire, you will naturally be promoted to nobility and achieve meteoric success. There will be no need to guard this bitter cold place anymore." Granny C laughed out loud and was extraordinarily pleased. She suddenly said ruthlessly, "The sorcerer creating havoc is not amenable to reason. When I capture him, I'll execute him with a lingering death and hang his head on the city gate as a warning to others." "That's right. May I request little General Qin to say some praises in front of Imperial Preceptor? Just now, the sorcerer creating havoc was not my doing this. Qin Feiyue understood and smiled. Be at ease, City Lord. I will definitely recommend City Lord in front of Imperial Preceptor. Granny C let off a sigh and her gaze wavered. She then lowered her voice. Truth to be said, after running this place for many years, I have gotten quite a number of remarkable treasures. When Imperial Preceptor enters the city, why not have little General Qin follow me to have a look? If there's anything that catches your eye, little General Qin could just feel free to take it. Qin Feiyue's heart stirred. There were treasures everywhere in great ruins, and there was no lack of treasures even before the Darkness invasion. Running Border Dragon City for so many years, Fu Yundi had naturally obtained countless of strange and unique treasures. If he could go into his treasure vault to choose a few unique treasures, he will naturally be the one at the winning end. On the Dragon Pillar, Qinmu couldn't help but be dazzled and impressed when he saw how Def painted and used his paintings as divine arts. Since young, he had learned calligraphy and painting from Def and read intensively. Yet it was still the first time he had seen Def showing his divine arts. With the power of one man to delay the advance of 100,000 men of Eternal Peace Empire's great army, this ability was simply astonishing. If there were no experts in Eternal Peace Empire that could break Def's divine arts, the great army that had 100,000 men would have died under Def's divine arts. Is that more on top of the pillar? Suddenly, Butcher's voice came from below. Qinmu stuck his head out to have a look only to see Butcher slicing towards the dragon pillar with his pig slaughtering knives. However, he was bewildered as there no knives landed on the dragon pillar. As Butcher slashed his knives, his body rose upwards as well and landed on the dragon pillars after a while. What are you doing this for, Grandpa Butcher? Qinmu asked curiously. Bearing my divine arts to destroy the dragon pillar. Butcher sheathed his pig, slaughtering knives back, and used his hands to prop himself over to the dragon's head. Looking at the great army advancing outside of the city, he said, when the Eternal Peace Empire's great army enter the city, my divine arts will explode in the dead of night. This dragon pillar will then shatter into pieces and be cleanly destroyed by my knife lights. The vanguard of Eternal Peace Empire received the attacks of Def and suffered great casualties. At this moment, the 2nd Division of Forces had joined together with the vanguard at the border and once again hurried towards Border Dragon City. Even though they had just suffered from Def's attacks, now that both forces were merged, their power had instead become greater. Qinmu jumped in shock and cried out. Grandpa Butcher decided to use the darkness to eliminate Eternal Peace Empire's great army? Butcher nodded his head and said, I've already buried my divine arts in the other 3 dragon pillars. Only this pillar was left. Qinmu felt a chill down his spine. If the 4 dragon pillars were to be destroyed at night, what comes for the Eternal Peace Empire shall be a disastrous calamity. When that time comes, it won't be known how many people will die in the darkness from unnatural causes. Qinmu hesitated. Grandpa Butcher, the people in the city. Butcher smiled. When Def cast his spell just now and attacked the Eternal Peace Army, Granny C sealed off the entire city and gathered everyone to the city plaza. Qinmu instantly felt at ease. There were many ancient temples in the city plaza that worshipped various stone statues. The temples there would help defend against the darkness invasion. It was apparent that Granny C and Def had already communicated with each other and set up the scheme. When the dragon pillars collapsed, the darkness will invade. The city plaza, which was surrounded by the temples, will become a safe zone. Since all the commoners are already there, they will naturally be safe. When the night falls, the Eternal Peace Empire's great army shall be annihilated. The only ones able to escape will only be Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and a few strong practitioners. When that time comes, it will be when we will have our final battle. Butcher smiled. Therefore, Village Chief has also come. Qinmu was bewildered. What can Village Chief do when he already had no limbs? Butcher was slightly excited and chuckled. We'll be able to see the strongest sword then versus the strongest sword now. Goddamn, I can't wait for it to be nighttime now. What is that? His expression suddenly froze as he looked towards the distance blankly. As if he had seen a ghost, he cried out, What the F*** is that? Qinmu followed his gaze and was slightly stunned. He could only see a tiny black and didn't know why Butcher was startled. However, the direction where the tiny black is should be Star Sea, which was 70 miles away from border Dragon City. F***CK, F***CK. Vulgarities spewed out continuously from Butcher. He suddenly rose into the sky and landed down before shouting, "Stay there and don't move. I'll go find village chief, apothecary, and the rest." This is still the first time I'm seeing such a thing after staying in Great Ruins for so long. F***CK. Shinmu was bewildered. It was still the first time he has seen Butcher losing his composure. When Butcher was insane, he had never spewed out so many vulgarities either. At most, he would only scold the damned heavens. Looking at the tiny black dot, he was suddenly stunned again. The tiny black dot had become much bigger. The tiny black dot became bigger and bigger. It was like a needle poked on a piece of white paper, but now it was like an ink blotch which was still getting bigger. Suddenly, figures flashed by and a few people instantly appeared beside Shinmu. They were the limbless village chief, the faceless apothecary, mute, and the rest. Blind, however, wasn't around. He should have been captured to the city plaza by the people of the gambling den. My God. Apothecary looked at the black and was extremely shocked as he muttered, "What a huge ship." The legends are true. There is truly such a ship. Village chief was also in a shock and muttered, "Why did this ship appear at this time?" Mute was in a daze and stared blankly. Deaf was also in a daze. F***CK. Butcher still continued to scold with vulgarities. Shinmu opened his heaven's eyes and tried his best to see the black, but he couldn't see it clearly. Gradually, the black duck grew bigger and bigger. It was now as big as a pitch black plate and was still becoming bigger. Soon the black plate became 3 yards long. Not long after, the plate had an area of several ar. Tremors kept on coming from the ground below. Shinmu felt his legs becoming numb as the tremors became stronger and stronger. It was as if there was an enormous monster continuously moving forward. He felt the air and the temperature rising as if it was the heat given off by the sun and was scorching the earth. However, it was still spring and 2 months away from summer. Afterward, Shinmu saw what village chief and the rest saw. A ship moved forward from Star Sea and was getting closer and closer. It was indeed a ship that was moving forward. On top of the ship floated a black sphere that was getting bigger and bigger. Shinmu's expression became weird and the shock in his heart multiplied several times. After some time did he let out a murky breath and grit his teeth, F***CK. Butcher stared at him. Children should not say such vulgarities. F***CK, what is this thing that had just appeared? The ship that was coming over was extremely enormous. It was a ship formed by tall and majestic volcanoes, which were spewing thick smoke and flames into the clouds. Lightning flashes all through the thick smoke, and there were sparks continuously lighting up the sky. The shape of the mountain was also very strange as there were no mountain peaks. The shape of the ship was also similar in that there was no building on top of it, but majestic palaces that were a dazzling sight. Despite it being shrouded in the thick smoke, the palaces were still shining in a brilliant gold and were very gorgeous. There were also chains that were so thick they could only be hugged by dozens of people floating in the sky like the string of a kite. These chains were all tied to that huge pitch-black sphere. While it was moving in the air, the chains collided together and gave off rattling sounds. And when the huge pitch-black sphere was being dragged, it would give off loud rumbles. Even the air droned from the tremors as if the sphere was extremely heavy. At this moment, the ship was traveling down surging river, causing the huge river of Great Ruins to boil from the heat and run dry. The fish monsters and river monsters all jumped ashore and fled. Shinmu was stunned for a moment and cried out, "Sunship." Village chief, apothecary, and the rest all looked towards him in bewilderment. Apothecary then asked curiously, "Moore, have you seen this ship before?" "I've seen it from the topographic map of Great Ruins." Shinmu also wavered mentally and physically. This humongous thing that looked like a ship should be the sunship that he saw on the map in Doom's Suppression Palace. When he originally saw the term sunship, he was still bewildered as to why it was called sunship. However, now he knew. Sunship was a ship that pulls the sun. And the sun should be the black sphere that was chained down by the sun ship. That enormous black ball should be the extinguished sun. It may be assumed that before the darkness had invaded great ruins, there must be a sun ship pulling a blazing sun and traveling across the lands of great ruins. Qin Mu was stumped for words. Why was the sun that the sun ship was pulling extinguished? Since the sun ship was pulling the sun, then what about the moon ship that was recorded on the map? Was it a huge ship pulling the moon? And also, where is the sun well? What about the moon well? Boom, boom. As the ship made its way here, the ship that was huge beyond belief actually grew legs and were as thick as mountains. These legs were formed from magmatic rocks, and light could even be seen from the crevices between the magmatic rocks. These light were magma that was like the blood of the sun ship. The enormous ship had grown 24 legs that corresponded to the 24 solar terms. Its legs looked very thick, but every step it took was a distance of 2 miles. The appearance of the enormous object was still extremely shocking. Def looked at Mute, who was giving off a feverish gaze and gesticulating. Def interpreted, "That's not a real sun," and was a treasure that people from that generation had created before the darkness descended. Mute, I think you're right. The enormous sun ship got closer and closer to border Dragon City, causing the air to get more and more parched. Qin Mu raised his head, yet he almost couldn't see the peak of the ship. The ship was too huge. The dazzling palaces fell into his eyes, and it seemed to look normal. However, for it to look normal at such a far distance, it was abnormal. It could be assumed that these palaces must be very huge if you were to walk in front of it. A grown man must be miniature when he stands inside. That's the place for the god race to reside. Village chief gently said, "I've heard they were called sun herders, and their god is called sun guardian." Sun herders? Everyone was slightly stumped for words. In the village chief was the one who had stayed the longest in great ruins. He had been here for several hundred years and knew the most. Apparently, he had also heard about the sun ship and knew some hidden information. I wonder if there's a descendant of the sun herders on board? Is there still a sun guardian on board? Village chief muttered. Sun ship passed by border Dragon City and went towards the magnificent army of 1,000 men and horses of Eternal Peace Empire. It was an especially grand and spectacular sight, so much so that the army had forgotten to advance and stared at the huge object foolishly. Too terrifying, too shocking. Thud. One of the legs from Sun's ship landed down, and the mountain-like leg crushed countless of soldiers into the mud. When the leg of the ship lifted up once again, a small lake was created from the stomp. Quickly run for your lives. Only now did someone react and scream before running back to escape. The soldiers behind have yet to react, therefore people started squeezing and stepping on one another. When the people behind had reacted and wanted to spread out to escape, it was too late. The immense sun ship followed the path the Eternal Peace Army took to move towards the borders of Eternal Peace Empire, crushing countless of soldiers in its path. No matter how much divine arts or flying swords from the officers landed on its body, they were all unable to shake up this huge ship. The two troops of the army were merged into one, therefore, there was an extremely large amount of people. Even if they wanted to escape, there was no way for them to escape. Despite there being divine arts practitioners flying in the air, they were also smacked by the legs that were lifted up by Sun Ship, just like an easy as smacking a fly. The immense Sun Ship continued to move forward and crushed countless of soldiers in its path. General Liu tried his best to attack the Sun Ship, but it was like an ant trying to shake a tree, unable to shake the huge ship the slightest. At the borders of Eternal Peace, sword lights flew out and slashed towards majestic mountain ship. Sparks flew off in all directions, yet it was also unable to harm the ship. When the treasure swords were kept back, the expression of the strong practitioners at the border changed hugely. Their swords were actually scorched red hot and were starting to melt. In the borders of Eternal Peace, several thousand divine arts practitioners cast spells and raised storms. As the thunder clouds started rolling, they were dispersed by the heat before they even reached the ship. It was an extinguished sun that Sun Ship was pulling, but it was still a sun after all. Its fire energy was simply too powerful. The ship had 12 pairs of legs, therefore it could move forward very fast. Soon enough, it had reached the front of the borders. Creaking sounds pierced through the air as the sun ship slowly came to a halt. Droning sounds came from the air as the black sun slowly floated forward and almost crossed over into the boundary of Eternal Peace Empire. At the borders, countless of soldiers stared upwards blankly and looked at the enormous object in front of the borders. The borders were majestic, but compared to the huge object in front of their eyes, they seemed miniature. Some officers' expression had turned pale white as they shuddered in fear, being almost unable to stand properly. Whereas the soldiers at the borders, whether they were martial arts practitioners or divine arts practitioners, they were all scared shitless by the sight in front of their eyes. The sunship that was created by the beings before the darkness descended sure is extraordinary. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stood on top of the building and looked up at Sunship. This magnificent ship gave everyone an extreme pressure, and even he was lightly palpitating. On the peak of Sunship and in front of the palaces, he saw a figure standing there. He raised his head and looked at the black sun. Even though this black sun was as huge as a real sun, it was still shocking enough. One can imagine what a spectacular sight it would be if the sun was reignited. This sun may be extinguished, but if Eternal Peace Empire's army was to collide with this enormous object, it would be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, overestimating their own capabilities. He could feel the divine energy coming from Sunship. There are still heavenly gods that are alive. The mysterious great ruins can't be threaded on rashly. Imperial Preceptor raised his hand and ordered, "Pass down my order to fall back and never set foot into great ruins for the next 50 years. The hearts of various generals behind him shuddered and immediately passed down his order. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor raised his head and his gaze landed on the palaces. He then said softly, "Sunship can't protect great ruins forever. Even the heavenly gods will die. The Sun Herders are merely a declining race. 50 years later, my Eternal Peace Empire will have the mighty power to unify great ruins, therefore, it's not wise to fight them head-on now." He turned and walked down the city gate tower. The urgent gong sounds used to halt troops rang from the city. As the soldiers outside the borders heard the gong, it was as if they were relieved from a burden and all of them ran back towards the borders. The enormous sun ship also slowly raised its legs and changed direction, stomping its way towards Border Dragon City. Not long later, the remnant of Eternal Peace Empire's army returned back to the borders and Sunship had reached the boundary of Border Dragon City. Raising his head up, a towering ship piercing the heavens that was pulling a black sun was something Chinmu had never dreamed of. Sunship came to a halt and its 24 legs slowly bent and sat down in a seize. On the dragon pillar, everyone had weird expression. This sunship doesn't seem like a ship, but more like a living being with 24 legs. With the ship being so close to Border Dragon City, heat waves swept towards the city. Even the city walls were scorched red-hot as if they were going to melt. It must be waiting for the Eternal Peace Empire's great army to completely retreat as it didn't leave immediately. "Is there still a Sun Guardian on board?" Shinmu mumbled. "There is. I can feel the aura of God." Village Chief had a grave expression. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sounded out the difficulties and retreated to avoid defeat. "It will never to step into great ruins rashly for the next dozens of years. Butcher, put away your knives or else the dragon pillars here will be destroyed." Butcher nodded his head and looked at Sunship excitedly. "We've prepared long for this battle, yet Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was scared off by the Sun Guardian, making us unable to fight that old fellow. How about we go on board and fight with the god?" Everyone had a queer expression and shook their heads. This lunatic was sure making trouble. If there was still a Sun Guardian on board, Butcher would probably be crushed to death while trying to pick a fight with the Sun Guardian using only the upper half of his body. Village Chief and the rest went down the dragon pillar. Shinmu continued to look upwards, his gaze wavering. He very much wanted to climb up this magnificent ship and have a look what's up there. Exactly what kind of generation it is for them to be able to build such enormous object that could even pull the sun and move? Thinking until here, the bow of the sun ship suddenly tilted downwards. Shinmu turned lifeless. He could see that the incomparably massive bow of the ship was almost as big as Border Dragon City. The ship just tilted downwards as if it was extremely light and had no weight at all. Only now could he see the scenery on board. There were actual mountains and river, grass and flowers. The glorious main hall stood tall and looked just like the sacred place for immortals. There were also many tall men that were so tall that Apothecary, who was considered tall and sturdy, seemed like a child compared to them. Qinmu reckoned their people's height started from 30 yards onwards, not to be outdone when compared to the strong workers of Heavenly Devil Cult. What's strange was that even though the bow of the ship was tilted downwards, the lake on the ship remained level and didn't spill out. Your jade pendant is very strange. It has a divine and extraordinary aura. In the heart of Sunship, a clear and loud voice sounded out. The jade pendant in front of Qinmu's chest gently floated up and seemed to fly towards Sunship. Qinmu's heart slightly shuddered, and he looked towards the source of the voice only to see a gigantic giant speaking. The giant was several times taller than the other giants and looked like a heavenly god. Both of her legs sunk into the body of the ship. More than half her legs were stuck into the ship, and she was sinking further up to her hips. Even so, she was still 300 yards tall. She had 4 arms, and each of the 4 arms was grabbing onto the pillars. Each pillar had chains that coiled around them. These were the chains that were chaining onto the black sun in the sky. Her body flared up with flames like a human on fire. The blazing fire energy makes Qinmu feel like he was being burned while looking at her. Strangely, when Qinmu saw her facial features, it was not of an adult woman, but of a little girl whose age was even younger than his. However, with such a tall and huge body, how could it be a little girl? She seemed very exhausted and was gasping for breaths. Senior recognized this jade pendant? Qinmu's heart trembled and immediately removed the jade pendant from his chest. He then saw all 4 hands of the female giant loosened and her body gradually shrunk. Not long after, she turned from a giant who was over 300 yards tall into a little girl who was a head shorter than Qinmu. Senior? Her voice was very melodious and she smiled very happily. She panted a few times before continuing, "I'm not a senior." She expended a lot of effort to pull her legs out from the ship's body. This sun ship was very weird. Her legs were actually fused together with the ship, and the flames of the ship were like blood vessels penetrating her legs, requiring a great deal of effort to be able to pull them out. When she pulled out her legs, the place she stood on regained its level. Where her legs and the ship had fused were 2 holes which were slowly regenerating. This little girl tried to walk, but her legs were trembling and she almost fell to the ground. She immediately used her 4 hands to break her fall and asked, embarrassed, "Can you come on board?" Qinmu looked at the other giants on board Sunship, and only the old giant nodded, "Let him come on board." A giant wearing simple clothes came to the bow of the ship and stretched out his arm. His arm served as a bridge between the dragon pillar and Sunship. Qinmu hesitated for a moment and stepped onto his palm, crossing this sturdy arm to reach Sunship. On the ship, he was slightly startled. It was much cooler here than he expected. He had originally thought that this place would be as horribly torrid as a furnace, but he had never expected here to be so cooling. "Moore, you little rascal." In Border Dragon City, village chief and the rest also sensed the abnormality on board of the sun ship. Turning back to take a look, they happened to see Qinmu walking up the giant's arm and boarding the sun ship. Apothecary couldn't help but to smile from anger. He sure has huge guts. He even dares to board the ship of God. The butcher took out his 2 pig slaughtering knives with his murderous intent overflowing. "They even dare to steal our child. Let us slaughter our way over." Village chief stared at him and said calmly, "They have no ill intention. Let Moore be. There doesn't seem to be a god aboard that ship." Qinmu walked to the side of the little girl and sun ship gradually tilted back horizontally. Because she hasn't walked for a long period of time, the little girl's legs were inconvenient to move and it was strenuous for her to stand up for a greeting. Therefore, she could only bow to Qinmu while sitting down. Qinmu returned her greeting and passed his jade pendant into her hands. The little girl carefully inspected it and pondered. Bizarre and cryptic language came from her mouth as she asked an old giant beside her, The old giant revealed an astonished expression and inspected Qin Mu, replying in a similar language that was difficult to understand. God language. Qin Mu was astonished. The young and the old were conversing in God language. He had heard the language of God before, but he didn't understand the meaning within. Therefore, he had no idea what they were saying. Both of them said a few sentences, and the girl returned the jade pendant back to Qin Mu. Grandpa Patriarch said that your jade pendant is not a god, not a devil, and not a Buddha. He has seen this kind of things before, and it should be from Carefree Village of Great Ruins. Carefree Village? Qin Mu's mind shuddered. Where's Carefree Village? The girl then asked the old giant again, and the old giant hesitated for a moment before saying some cryptic language. The girl shook her head. Carefree Village is very mysterious and will only appear when the darkness shroud great ruins. He also doesn't know where it is. Qin Mu was slightly disappointed and remembered the name Carefree Village. Carefree Village could be his birthplace where his parents are. No matter what, he will have to find this place. I was impressive, right? The girl chuckled. Qin Mu was stumped for words with a weird expression. You are the one driving Sun ship and scared the Eternal Peace Empire's great army away? The girl was immensely proud of herself. You didn't expect it, right? Qin Mu indeed didn't expect it. Not only was the Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor scared off by her, even Village Chief, Mute, and the rest jumped in shock. They thought there was an extremely ancient heavenly god on board Sun ship, which was why Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor speculated that his power was no match for her and retreated. They would never have dreamt that it was this little girl who was controlling Sun ship. Of course, the Sun ship was simply too shocking and too powerful, therefore they made such a miscalculation. My name's Yan Jingjing, what's your name? That little girl asked curiously. Qin Mu. Qin Mu hesitated and said, I also have no idea if my surname is Qin or I'm called Qin. It was because of this Qin word on my jade pendant that village chief chose my surname as Qin. The meaning of Mu is to herd cows. What's the meaning of Yan Jingjing? It means there's a lot of suns and fire. Yan Jingjing tried her best to stand up, but she must not have used her legs for a long time. Therefore, she walked unsteadily. Qin Mu saw that the muscles on both of her legs have dried up and became very thin. With only skin clinging to her bones, there was not an ounce of flesh. She was so emaciated that people couldn't help but to feel shocked. When I was born, I was like a sun. My mother was burned to death by the flames on my body. Therefore, Grandpa Patriarch gave me the name Yan Jingjing. Yan Jingjing's expression turned dull. When I grew up, Grandpa Patriarch said that I have the bloodline of the Sun Guardian on my body. The power of Sun Guardian is very strong and allow me to be acknowledged by the Sun ship, controlling the Sun ship to travel great ruins. There's only me and my race that could control the ship. Therefore, I've become the Sun Guardian of this generation. She then smiled happily again. You're the boy who herds cows and I'm the girl who herds sun. When I fuse together with the Sun ship, my powers are very strong, just like a heavenly god. That's why I could scare the bad guys away. Did I scare you just now? Qin Mu smiled. You did. Yan Jingjing lowered her head. I'm sorry. I was too exhausted just now, therefore I've stopped here for a break and scared you. Qin Mu was stunned and smiled. It's okay. Why are your legs so skinny? Grandpa said that the son of our Sun Herd clan had extinguished. Therefore, when I control the Sun ship absorbs my power, making me skinnier and skinnier. Yan Jingjing continued, when my power runs out, I will become like the previous Sun Guardian, fusing together with this ship. That was how my father died. If the sun would be able to reignite, Sun ship will absorb the power of the sun and even nourish the Sun Guardian, making me very strong. Qin Mu's heart wavered. He looked at the black sun in the sky and muttered, required to ignite the sun? Who would be able to do it? Maybe only true heavenly God could do it. Why must you guard here and be the Sun Guardian? Because it is the duty of us sun herders. Sun Guardian is a clergy. Long time ago, I have no idea how long. Anyways, very long ago, we sun herders were appointed as Sun Guardian to guard the Sun ship and protect great ruins. This duty was then passed down generation to generation. As for who appointed us as Sun Guardian, I've also no idea. Maybe Grandpa Patriarch might know. Yan Jingjing was very cheerful and seemed like she didn't have any playmates. She sat down and chattered non-stop with Qin Mu, talking about all the interesting stuff she had seen along with her journey. Qin Mu looked around. The Sun Herd clan were all giants, and there were young boys and girls who could play together with Yan Jingjing. However, they all revered Yan Jingjing very much and didn't dare to come forward. Furthermore, these people were also very tall and sturdy. They were much taller and stronger than Yan Jingjing. Yan Jingjing looked more like she belonged to the human race and was different from them. Qin Mu guessed that maybe Yan Jingjing had the bloodline of a human. However, it could be possible that it was because her power was being absorbed by the sun ship, therefore, her body had become smaller. What was strange was when Yan Jingjing fused with the sun ship, she instead became abnormally tall and sturdy, just like an awe-inspiring heavenly goddess, which meant that his guess might not be accurate. What he didn't know was that the Sun Herd clan wasn't naturally huge. It was because they had to stay on Sun Ship where there was a divine energy flowing around in the air. When the Sun Herders of Sun Herd clan consume food, they would unknowingly consume this divine energy, resulting in their bodies to become abnormally tall and sturdy. It was because Yan Jingjing's power was absorbed by Sun Ship, therefore the power she ingested wasn't enough to cover the power that was absorbed. Therefore, she didn't become tall and sturdy like the rest of her clansmen. When she fused with Sun Ship, the power of Sun Ship and hers would combine together, which was why she could become as imposing as a heavenly god. In the future, if I have the ability, I will help you ignite the sun and free you, Qin Mu declared. Really? Yan Jingjing's eyes sparkled brightly and excitedly said, I'll wait for this day to come. Then I'll be able to walk and be like everyone else. Qin Mu nodded his head heavily and smiled. I'll definitely find a way to ignite the sun. At this moment, the giant patriarch came over and said, Sun Guardian, the army of Eternal Peace Empire has completely retreated. Yan Jingjing stood up with difficulty and waved at Qin Mu with a sweet smile. I have to go too. I'll leave from Star Sea and come out from Sunwell. If you want to find me, you can just come to Sunwell. Qin Mu nodded his head, and the girl walked unsteadily back to the pillars. As her hand touched the pillar, her body rapidly expanded, and her legs sunk into Sun Ship, fusing together with it. Her hands grabbed onto the other 3 pillars, and her body started to ignite with blazing flames, making her unapproachable. The giant patriarch came over and sent Qin Mu back to the bow of the ship. The old and gray-haired sun herder had a deep grief tone in his voice as he said softly, The Sun Guardian does not have many years to live. Qin Mu's heart shuddered and raised his head to look at the elder. He then looked at the giantess in flames, and Yan Jingjing was smiling at him. If you're a guest from Carefree Village, you may have a way to reignite the sun. After all, the giant patriarch hesitated for a moment and didn't continue his words. He instead sent Qin Mu down the ship, and this unimaginable artifact created by God started to slowly stand up and walk towards Star Sea. As the sun set, the inclined sunlight shone onto the ancient ship that gradually moved far away. The blackness in the sun also gradually became smaller, and soon, the sun ship couldn't be seen anymore. The black sun also became a black that was so tiny it could no longer be seen.